Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnie Lukes here at the Crossroads, and I'd like to welcome my two guests from Canada. Welcome, Robert Klinck.
Good to be here again, Arnie.
No worries. How's the weather, Robert?
The weather is quite moderate. It was, I think, 7 degrees today. The
hmm
snow is gradually disappearing.
hmm
And tomorrow and the next day, we're supposed to have rain. So
Okay,
that'll,
beautiful. The rain will
yeah,
melt the snow, melt the
it'll help.
ice.
It'll
Yeah,
help. Yeah.
that's good. Excellent. And Wallace Klinck. Welcome, Wallace.
Hi there, Arnie. Well, our weather is a little bit variable. It's been above zero, and it's going to be going down on a day or two to about maybe 8 or 10 below, and then it's going back up again. So it's kind of jumping all over the place, but it's
Yeah,
bearable.
that
And we've
variab
had a little, not much snow.
Okay, that variability is interesting, Wallace, because for us it's mid 20s, high 20s, maybe just getting over to 30. Um, in a cooler day, it's only down to 21. So we've got a sort of a swings and roundabouts of about 10 degrees on average, and there's not really much in it. But what is interesting is we've had a little bit of rain, and my what I've put in with seeds I've put in, we were looking at them the other day, and they're all up. The seeds are up. So
Oh,
so this is autumn. This is the new growth coming into the winter pasture and manure crops and things like that. So it's to me it's quite encouraging to look at that and realise that the seasons are there. The rain does come, the sun does shine, warms the soil, and you can get your crops in if you're on the ball and you follow the season roll with the punches. So yeah, for us. And that brings us to the title for today, Problem Solving in a Full Employment Economy. Full employment economy. That is that the desire is to have everyone, men, women, whatever, all employed. And to me, it's ironic in an age of automation, advanced control, robotics, there's still this call for full employment. It's almost like pushing back the tide. That's my point of view. No doubt there are others. So I'll open the floor. Robert Klinck.
Well, if you have full employment as a goal, then it detracts from the more realistic goal of trying to achieve results in a concrete way. You have a project, you want to get it done in the most efficient way. But if you set full employment as the goal, then the object of efficiency goes out the window, because the efficiency in the system is to keep people busy, whether they're busy at useful occupations or not. And the whole purpose of this, of course, is to rationalize the distribution of incomes, because the only source of income for the vast majority of the population is through employment.
hmm
Some people do quite well off investments and dividends and that sort of thing. And really, there's no reason why the whole population couldn't be doing quite well off dividends from a social credit standpoint.
Yeah.
But for some reason, this is regarded as demoralizing and degenerative in society.
Mm.
People have to be kept busy. So if you have full employment, you have a situation where people are in an exaggerated state of competition against each other.
hmm
And this also is destructive of the goal of achieving results, because it means that there is a tendency to not have a cooperative attitude toward other people.
Mm.
You're on a competitive basis rather than an attitude of saying, let's get together and achieve the results that are beneficial for all.
Yeah.
So it's a
Mm.
it's a very wrong footing. And if you look at it analytically, it distorts everything in the economy.
Yeah.
We can get into this more as we develop this discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's it. That's very interesting, Robert. And what did come to my mind quite vividly is the purpose behind policy, if you like, the purpose behind it. Um, and that is that can the government actually promote a policy that its purpose is for cohesion, for stability, for mutual love and cooperation as a key word rather than competition, dog eat dog. Um, I noted in Australia we have this water was shortened in supply, so there was an insufficiency. And as soon as that happened, the price went through the roof because people were vying for water rather than actually do one more project to increase the supply of water, which would have kept water at a minimum, and therefore the outworking of the cost of water wouldn't have affected the price in the supermarket or in industry or wherever that you need water. So it's so the purpose or the intention behind it, to me, is quite malevolent, destructive towards the community. It's not constructive. It's not actually conducive to good relations between people. Your thoughts, Wally Klinck?
Well, Arnie, it's a very complex subject, and you certainly, I think, hit on the core of the problem. It is a question of policy. Now, if it's a question of policy, that raises a question of what is the nature and purpose of human life. Can we define that as humans, or are we merely part of it to do things as we would naturally do things? It suggests by being in the nature of a policy that it's something that is originating somewhere, and we have to ask, where is it originating? Why is it originating? And to whose benefit does the policy who benefits from the policy? So I think that it's very important that we not just run around like ants in an ant heap in a constant state of frenetic activity without stopping to think, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And what are the results of it? Are those results going to really be beneficial to society and to the individuals in society or not? Do we view society as individual human beings in association, or do we regard society as some kind of a gigantic planned organization or activity? And that raises a question of what is a human being? Is a human being just simply a reactive creature? Or is a human being a thinking, creative, imaginative, seeking individual, seeking truth as an individual, not just as a responsive creature to some kind of demands or commands coming from above within the society itself? In other words, are we free people or are we not? Are we free or are we slaves? I think that's so important. And we're just inundated with the idea of every day we hear the statistics on unemployment. Well, as though it's just assumed that if the unemployment level is a point or two higher, we're headed for some kind of a disaster, or there's something unhealthy about it. And and I don't think, if you think about just normal activities that you would engage in, that you would think that way, because you would be thinking, I have so much time, so much resources, I have so much I want to do in life. Do I want to make it easier or harder for myself to achieve these ends or to make time for them? You wouldn't deliberately go about carrying out some kind of a daily function in an inefficient manner just to keep yourself busy. That would be considered to be quite irrational and a total waste of time. Actually, irrational and an immoral waste of time, because you're actually interfering with your ability to do other things. So there are many, many aspects to this whole thing. And of course, the main thing is, I think Bob pointed this, there's an artificiality to it all. If the policy is full employment, then obviously you're going to have certain plans or designs, efforts to maintain full employment as a policy according to plan. Now, that is a form of idolatry, because if you're doing it just for the sake of the exercise, you are worshiping the exercise rather than the results. In other words, inefficiency is an integral part of such a policy, because if you become more efficient so that you don't have to do this, put out the same amount of effort in order to provide for your fundamental basic needs, then obviously you are creating artificial activities in order to accomplish this policy, which is just senseless. But it does serve a purpose. It serves a purpose of making you a slave.
Yeah,
I was
that's
in a hospital a couple of nights ago, and they kept me in for a while, did some tests. And the nurse came along right in the open area where all of the employees were sitting at their desks and so on. And she said, well, you're free to go. You're asymptomatic, so you're free to go. You're a free man. I looked at her and I said, as loudly as I could, reasonably, I said, I'm not a free man. I said, none of us are free men, or free. None of us are free. And they all looked and they all laughed. But,
mm,
you know,
mm.
should they have laughed or should they have scowled?
Yeah, that's right. Are we actually free to pursue our own ends? And of course we
Mm-hmm.
are, in a sense that the fact is that without some form of income to access to the necessities of life, then you're actually obliged to pursue employment. Unless, of course, you got to a stage where you've got the issue of homelessness. I personally am quite concerned about that because I see that as, the images that I'm seeing from the northeastern parts of America, Chicago, Detroit, even San Francisco, Los Angeles. The levels of homelessness are also rising in Australia. They've got, the shelters are increasing, if you like, the mobile shelters for showering, for cleaning, and also for support. And it's becoming a way of life. And you sort of look at it and you're thinking, hang on. We're heading in the wrong direction here. We're pursuing something that is just completely wrong when it's just collapsing in front of our eyes. To me, I mean, I'm looking at the statistically, the shops. As I drive past, I'm seeing more and more shops boarded up, and that is that there's not people there to lease them. There's a surplus because the economy is winding down. So to pursue a policy of full employment in a sense when there's more than enough in the supermarkets to buy and yet there's not the demand, it's to me a clear indicator that there's insufficient spending power. That's only my observation and thoughts, and no doubt there are others. Your thoughts, Robert Klinck?
Well, I think Wally is right in saying that this preoccupation with employment reduces man to the level of just an economic cog.
Hmm.
And is this the nature of man? It's a question that nobody seems to ask these days, because the predominance of the financial pressure on people is just accepted as a normal thing. But it isn't normal, and it has tremendous implications for the environment in which we're living. For example, there is not only deliberate inefficiency in production. I mean, you can see this with some of these public works in Ottawa. I've noticed that if they have need of, say, an overpass in order absolutely to keep the traffic moving, they can put one of these things up overnight.
Mm,
But if the thing is not critical, not essential, it could take them years to basically achieve the same end.
yeah.
If they just string it out and everybody's there every day, month after month. You wonder what they're doing, but
Hmm.
they're all collecting their paychecks, presumably at the end of the week or the month. And also, there's the issue of built-in obsolescence.
Hmm.
You get a deterioration in the quality of products
Hmm.
because you want things to wear out so that they have to be replaced, so that people have jobs replacing them.
Hmm.
It's a real problem too. The Americans used to have some pretty good products, but I've bought some American products coming from the United States lately, and they remind me of what they used to say of Japanese products after the Second World War.
Mm,
Fall apart, they were junk. So,
yeah.
uh, is the population allowed to have pride in their economic activity?
Mm,
If they do, if they build things that are very durable, then they're sabotaging their future, because they won't have to deliver as many products to the market, and therefore the tendency will be for employment to fall off.
hmm.
So it's really something. And you can even look at phenomenon of food production.
Yeah.
There's, what is the basis of human health? Well, it's very largely the quality of your food intake.
Yeah.
But the food is of much inferior quality to even when I was a boy. I remember eating peas and carrots and strawberries, and the taste would just knock you out.
Mm-hmm.
You can't find those products in supermarkets anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is sort of washed out.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another effect of this pressure on from the economic standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's everywhere, and having deleterious effects in everything it touches.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your comments there, Robert. I see it with food for sure. Fast-growing food, quick crops, high turnover, and things like that. And it says, okay, you're going to make a killing in a sense. But the thing is that for myself, for my family, I'm always promoting healthy choices with food, and grow as much as you can. And we feed our trees and we nurture our trees, and even our chooks. An egg. I mean, just one healthy egg coming from our chooks is to me is a delight. And when we've got 4 or 5 coming a day, on a good day, well, that to me is just wonderful. That here we are, these little containers of liquid gold, if you like. There really is value in it, and those things, of course, in comparison, you're putting it aside as the obsolescence, the built-in obsolescence, or the fast production, or the fast turnover, in order to make profit. But the quality is going, and it actually is the undoing, because I don't know that we as a people are any healthier. I don't think it's actually we're deriving greater benefit, but we certainly need to consider a lot of things when we look at this, not only employment, but also manufacture and quality control. Your thoughts, Wally?
Well, you mentioned competition, and competition viewed from a constructive standpoint is a very good thing, because what you're doing is you're offering your product or your service, and you will offer it according to a degree of efficiency and suitability for the consumer. And the consumer has the right and the responsibility to make the right choice. You can have competition that is competition for real things, like the utility, the beauty, or whatever it is of the product. Or you can have competition for artificial means. And that's what we have today. We are trying to serve a financial system which purports to reflect reality, but which does not. That system puts an artificial pressure on everyone within the economy to try and compete in order to meet the requirements of financial debt. And if you assume that that debt is a perfectly normal thing, well, then I guess that's the way it is. However, social credit very seriously challenges the idea that the financial system is a reflection of reality.
Mm-hmm.
The financial system is a constricted view of the whole totality of human activity in the first place. And it also is defective in that it does not distribute sufficient financial means of liquidating the financial costs which are generated in industry. So you have to ask the question, what are these costs in industry? Are they real costs, or are they simply results of an accountancy convention, which has nothing necessarily to do with the physical realities involved?
Mm-hmm.
Problem is we've had to develop a representative system, which we call money, in order to facilitate our activities in a complex world. But Douglas did some very scientific work on this, and I think that he brought a conception of reality into it that simply does not exist today. He brought a reality, a conception where you could bring finance into proper relationship with the actual physical procedures or processes that are going on. And they're widely divergent in our society, and they're becoming more divergent because your debt is becoming greater and greater and greater as a burden upon you, and you are putting it off on the future in the way of a mortgage against the future more and more. And you can see that something is not in sync. It's out of sync. And it is fatally out of sync because it is continuing that way, and not only continuing that way, but becoming proportionately greater as a burden upon society. So we have to think about our conventions of accountancy and of credit, financial credit as it relates to real credit, the ability to really produce real things, and determine whether or not these things are in a realistic relationship, which they are definitely not, and which should be quite obvious to anyone. But the trouble is, the world has not come to an understanding of why, and Douglas cast an enormous light upon that subject.
Yeah, yeah. I wrote last week before about a critical moment in history, and the actual Douglas suggestion that you actually place the proposal on the table before people. The proposal being that they consider a national credit authority, a national dividend, consumer price subsidy, so that we can balance the economy, hold it in financial equilibrium. And I note that nowadays there are what they call the basic income guarantee, or um, what were they called, trials out there. And I think in Australia they've tried them, in Canada they've tried them, Sweden they're trying them, and to me these are a tax-based confiscatory system. They take from Peter to give to Paul, and that in itself won't work. It's not a redistribution of an insufficiency. That won't actually achieve the purpose, its function. What you need to consider is a creation in order to hold it as a sufficiency, a creation of new credits, and then issued as a dividend to all. Now, I've actually had in my life, I've held some shares a couple of times, and I did receive a dividend. And I can be honest with you, I didn't waste that dividend. I considered it as something quite valuable, and considered how I would actually dispose of it. And under consideration, I think sometimes I reinvested, and other times I used it either to save or to put towards paying an outstanding debt off early. And to me, I don't know that I yielded to this great temptation that all hell would break loose on me, that I was actually given something for nothing. That was my demonstration of it, and I put it to all out there in our viewing land. Consider it. If you received a dividend, something for nothing, based on what the machines are doing, what advanced control, what automatics, robotics is doing. If you received a dividend in order to purchase a sufficiency, in other words, keep food on the table and keep power on your lights and air conditioning going if you're cold, a sufficiency, would you squander it? Are you so untrustworthy that you couldn't actually handle that without making an entire mess of it? I think not. I think you can be trusted. And so this puritanical attitude of receiving something for nothing, their opposition to it is so wrong. Problem solving in a full employment economy. Your thoughts, Robert Klinck?
Well, you will notice that the revolutionary groups in society universally condemn dividends and inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, many of these groups are actually financed by people who are living very handsomely off dividends, and they have vast inheritances through the family fortunes that have been accumulated through the past.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a small group of people who don't want the general population to have the benefits that they themselves are enjoying.
Yeah.
It's really a nasty attitude, and most unfortunate. They maintain always the dignity of people having to function under the pressure of economic necessity. But this is a situation that is dynamic. It's bound to change because the means of providing for our economic needs is changing. So the tendency is for this necessity to diminish, because we're always having more and more efficient ways of providing for our means. And this provides an opportunity for the community in general to benefit from this. But given the means of distribution of incomes that we have today, which is almost entirely through employment, people do not have automatically the benefits of the dividends and the inheritance that the economy naturally should be delivering to them.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking, Robert, about Venezuela, and an article I read the other day of a robot they've developed that now harvests lettuce. And I would assume if it's harvesting lettuce, it would also harvest celery. And these are high labor intensive tasks. And so if you actually place a robot on over that task, of course, those people become unemployed. Now, the fact is that agriculture is less than 5% of the working population. Agriculture, in order to achieve a sufficiency so that everyone is fed and they go to the supermarket and there's always food there for them. And you think 5%. Now, Venezuela at the moment can't feed itself. I would suggest it's more likely it won't feed itself. It's actually running a food production shortage deliberately in order to control the population. 5% is all it takes to produce all you need. And what, they couldn't go to 6%, they couldn't go to 10% in order to produce enough? Of course they can, but they choose not to. The problem solving in a full employment economy is that they're doing other things instead of securing the necessities of life so there's sufficiency. It's all about control. It's all about control. This whole narrative is about control. Your thoughts, and Wally Klinck.
My thoughts are such a scramble, I'm not sure I can express them. For instance, we were bombarded every day about the central bank and the prime rate and all that sort of thing. And but you see, again, we're thinking in terms of a pyramid of control. Should the economy be controlled merely by the way it functions in using its resources in an unencumbered way, or should it be controlled by some kind of a policy that is coming down from the apex of a pyramid of power? You see, it's such a perverse conception of life, because you don't see that in nature. Nature typically is not like that. I mean, a lion, slayer, we don't know what he's thinking about, but he's sitting there and he's not spending his whole day working. You know, the beasts of the field, the fish of the sea, and the fowl of the air, they have a lot of fun. They're running around doing things just as they do them. But we are operating in a pyramid of power where we're doing things under somebody else's direction all the time, practically, in order to gain the financial means to life. So it is such a different situation when you look at humanity in its form of association and activity, and when you look actually at nature, it's such a different conception. And you see, it stems, as you said, Arnie, from this, you referred to the word Puritan. It's self-judgmental. I mean, if you take a theological position even, Jesus said he did not come to judge the world. But the financial system judges everybody. We're all judged down this pyramid of power, and we depend upon the judgments that are made upon us for our very livelihood and survival.
Yeah.
He said he came not to judge the world, but to save the world. He said, seek the truth. Well, if that's not scientific, I don't know what is. There's nothing airy-fairy about that. That seeking the truth is about as realistic as you can get. And insofar as we do seek the truth and find it, we prosper. And if you look at the achievements of civilization, that's the way it's been. We've prospered by finding truths in relation to natural principles and relationships and association, which have allowed us to generate certain income, certain profit from a beneficial and efficient form of association. And by the way, the dividends we're talking about are not just dividends, which can be interpreted in sense of physical things necessarily, or food, clothing, and shelter. There is an even greater dividend, and that's the dividend of leisure. It's the freedom from subservience in an artificially hyper economic dispensation or activity. What are we best or most intended for? What is the most rewarding thing for human beings? Is it to simply be engaged every day in this frenetic activity, running back and forth to work and either doing some useful thing or some completely unuseful thing or some quite destructive thing? Or is it in the ability to sit back, relax, and think, reflect, and to observe the wonders of nature, the wonders of creation, and to literally be whole creatures in that sense, or just slaves? See, we are so completely dominated by this judgmental Puritanism, which demands that, on the assumption that there is real scarcity, and we have, in the face of it, when we have absolutely enormous abundance and a much greater even potential abundance, but it's suppressed by the financial system, because the financial system is operated by credit, and credit is regarded by the banking system, which has a monopoly on the issue of credit, as a commodity which they sell. Now, you know that any monopolist wants to make his product, in a sense, scarce, because that enhances its value to him, because he can derive more from the rest of society in order to part with that. More than he is legitimately entitled to. And you see, that's the way the system works. So it's just one big system of frenetic activity, unnecessary activity, destructive activity, a form of slavery, and people running around madly trying to survive within the context of this insane system. It's without any rationale at all, and certainly to a highly destructive end, because it goes beyond that interpersonal relationships to marriage relationships, family relationships. It affects the quality of association on all sorts of levels throughout society, because we're all under an artificial pressure, an artificial competitive pressure, competing for something that is not real, but that is ever present and ever dominant. And it's just perverted the whole nature of human life. If we can't recognize that we receive things as a gift from nature, a gift from association that is inherent within reality, and that we think in our vanity or our foolishness that we produce everything we need, and that only incomes are justified by what we produce as individuals, in complete neglect to the role of non-human factors in production and wealth, then we are completely detached from reality.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that's beautifully put, Wally. Robert Klinck, we're at 33 and a bit. Your closing comments and thoughts, please.
Well, the ultimate solution that man has found to the full employment problem is, of course, war. Because once you get a war going, everybody's very busy. Not only are they very busy, but they tend to be more prosperous, because there's all kinds of money around, and it's getting into the hands of the population. So war, actually, by the standards of full employment, is a desirable condition to be in. It's a dreadful thing. It generates prosperity, and then when the war is over, as we've seen in the past, there's a tendency to impose austerity and even rationing. This certainly happened in Britain after the end of the Second World War. So the full employment provided by the war ended, and rather than freeing up resources so that people could benefit by them in peacetime, the position of people economically was reduced in a very severe way. Yes, and what was I going to say? Well, also there's a problem in the effect on statistics, that sort of thing. You hear that there are lies, damned lies in statistics. And I personally believe that the statistical information we receive from government is all skewed and falsified in order to justify this full employment policy. In Canada, we had a governor of the Bank of Canada last year, I think, he actually said that the economy of Canada was functioning at 99% of capacity. Well, how could anybody make such a ridiculous statement? And this is the governor of the Bank of Canada, the man who is principally responsible for how the economy develops. Ask any manufacturer if he could increase his capacity, and he'd say, if there's demand, I'll do it. Yeah. Most of the land is lying fallow. Well, if you want to get it cultivated, then you could multiply our productive capacity many times over. So we're told all this ridiculous information, and it's designed to put us in a conceptual box that makes it impossible for us to see the reality of what's going on around us, which is the capacity for abundance, but a denial of our access to the abundance because the financial system is defective.
Yeah, good summary, Robert. The only thing that I'd add to this is when we look at policy and we're identifying central bank policy or financial policy as dominating us, you've got to take into account the influence that mainstream media has over the influence of that policy. And that is at the moment we're looking at two phenomena since Christmas, two phenomena that are quite glaring. One is the climate emergency, just ongoing, where it's demanding more and more government interference. And then now we've got this coronavirus, and it's again more and more government interference, more and more government domination over the individual. And this to me is an outworking of the very policy we're talking about, finance. It's just that the mainstream media happens to be the propaganda wing, or the, if you like, the public relations wing of finance. And so while we're being cornered, we're being bombarded, we're being just attacked with this information every single day, its purpose is the same, always the same, and that is domination over the individual. That no narrative outside of what they present is going to be considered, no narrative. So Douglas social credit, of course, won't get the light of day, but the Chinese communist social credit monitoring and point scoring and all that totalitarian or technocracy certainly gets the light of day. So this, of course, you've got to recognise media as the handmaid of finance. It's a very interesting forum, problem solving in a full employment economy. In a day of advanced control, robotics, automation, industrialization, we can produce 1,000 times more what one man could do. Multiplication factor, 1,000 times more. And of course, technology is increasing it to levels of 2,000 or more. It just keeps going through the roof with modern technology. What are we going to do with it? So, yes, very interesting discussion. Thank you so much, Robert and Wally Klinck, for today's topic.
Thank you, Arnie.
Thanks again, Arnie.
It's a big subject, and there's a lot more discussion, but it's very interesting.
No worries. Cheers then.